Well, thank you for coming to spend your evening. So this is a topic that I deal with every day in work as a family docs. And as you'll see, it ties to many problems. This is also something that I have a special interest in as far as kind of living the talk or following, practicing what I preach. So I will say that I do not do a perfect job of diet, and so I feel like some people get maybe defeated in that we say you're supposed to do these certain things and they don't do it, and so they just say, well then, why bother doing any of it? I'll just give up and I'll stick with what I know. So I do a pretty good job, but I have a sweet tooth, and so desserts are not on the list here really, but I think I have a pretty good metabolism, so I sort of justify it that way. Not everybody is that way, so if you are somebody with slow metabolism, then you're going to eat less and you're going to have to do things, and it's going to be a little harder for you than other people. And on that note, as a disclaimer, this is a general dietary advice. If you have a specific condition, then we need to modify your diet in some way. So if you have kidney disease, some of these things you will not be able to eat. So besides diet, I would say another component, exercise is medicine, and that's a whole other topic, but that also has separate benefits apart from what we'll talk about along with diet. And so sort of our goals are, we're going to go through some data and some benefits that you would see if you increase your plant consumption. Now, along with this diet does allow or advocate that you can have fish and lean meats and dairy products. But there are many data points to suggest that plants are much better for us. So if you go on to the low-carb diet of just eat a bunch of meat, that's the opposite of a lot of what we're going to talk about. And then, like I said, just some practical applications. So I'll show you that you don't have to be perfect. Even if you're better than you are now, you would get some benefit. So food should be fun also, or hopefully enjoyable. My son is very much into dinosaurs, and so we make dinosaur pancakes, like T-Rex pancakes, or Diplodocus. My wife has made him some little people to eat with vegetables. So, we tell children to eat vegetables, but then maybe some of that falls away as adults, and it's an example that adults set for children that can carry into their lifelong skills. So as parents and grandparents, the example you set can carry on in the future. And so I don't think this theory is true, but I would like to think if there were Cheetos around and the dinosaurs ate them, that would be one reason they became extinct. Okay, so all of these conditions can relate to diet. And so if you get heart disease or strokes or diabetes, any of those things increase your chance of dying in a set defined period. So I could put death on there and say you can delay death by eating better. And so there's a whole set of components. And so, well, why should we care about this? I just had to put this up because we have such partisan rancor that I will say there's Republicans and Democrats during all of this time from 1960 to projected in the future. The cost of our healthcare is going up. It doesn't matter who's in charge. And part of it is that we as citizens are not eating correctly, and we're contributing to that cost. So just to maybe be nice to whoever shares your opposite view. And I also say it's well known that we spend a lot more than other countries. Part of it is because we can get MRIs when we want, and because we have new technologies, and those other places don't necessarily, but I will argue that also part of it is our diet is worse than those other countries. So prescription drugs actually don't make up a huge percentage of the total cost, but you can see the total cost increases. The percentage of overall healthcare expenditure based on medications actually dropped for a little bit, and part of it was there's a rise of cheaper prescriptions. So a lot of things that we used routinely became generic, So like the Walmart $4 program, a lot of people are aware of, I mean, that didn't exist 10 years ago to my knowledge. So that actually stabilized prices for a little while. And now there's a lot of new injection drugs and infusion things that cost a lot more. But you're going to spend more money. The more medicines you take, the more money it will cost you. So if you can do something to avoid taking as many medications, you should save some money in doing it. Now, that might be offset by what you spend on your food, but I guess I would argue you need to think about what you're spending and that it's not in a vacuum. So if you're spending a lot on medicine and eating junk food, but you spent more on food and you took less medicines, that it would at least be a neutral cost, if not a net benefit, because you wouldn't end up with diabetes or a heart attack and thousands of dollars in hospital costs. Anyways, I think people are well aware we are getting heavier as a country and that the diabetes rate is increasing. And so part of this may be because for a while we advocated a low-fat diet, which a low-fat diet in the right context actually does a lot of good, but instead what we did was we said, oh, from a marketing standpoint, we should make things low-fat. So take out the fat, well, you have to have either protein or sugar. And so if you take out the fat and we replace it with sugar, now you have diabetes occur. So it's not just doctors' fault for recommending things, and it's not just people's fault for being confused, and it's not just companies for marketing things, but I would say some of the way we've developed things is because we said, oh, well, this must be the way to do something, create this appeal, and we kind of go down the road and we learn a little bit of different. So a lot of things I'm going to advocate, if you go back in time, these are things that we ate 100 and some years ago, and maybe we were a little led astray, and so we can go back to our roots, so to speak. I was just playing around and looking for things. So the only thing I could find really locally is, so here's Itasca County, and we have a higher heart disease rate. It's a death rate. So if you live right by where there's a bunch of cardiologists in the cities, you're more likely to be able to be saved because they rush you to the hospital and put a stent in and you're still alive. And here you can be in the middle of the woods and, like for hunting season, for instance, when we get this a lot, and then it takes a while to get in and then it takes a while to get care, then that can actually adversely affect you. So I would like to think that if we're going to be like rugged individualists and we're going to live in a rural area, then maybe we can eat better and have less chances of needing to be rushed to the cardiologist. So we don't spend very much on public health. We spend a lot of money. There's lots of money in drugs and there's lots of money in marketing things, but there's not any market in telling you to eat better. And so it comes out of government expenditure and foundations and things, not for selling people a bunch of things to eat. So all we hear is maybe the wrong advertising, not the right advertising. So your healthcare costs a lot more if you become obese. It costs immensely more if you have diabetes. We're less active than we used to be. So people will tell me, well, my grandparents ate bacon and eggs when they grew up. Well, they lived on a farm and they farmed and they had to do the work on the farm. And they actually knew what their pigs and their chickens were eating. They weren't just being fed a bunch of antibiotics and other stuff in a factory farm. And then they grew their own vegetables and they had to work to get their vegetables. If you had bad weather, you could have starved, or you had to go through lean periods. We have no lean periods. We only have surplus and sitting. So that's part of our problem. So activity, again, the exercise thing is another talk, but activity will help you. And if you sit all day long in an office job, you actually, there's lots of studies showing an increased death rate. So you can do everything else healthy and sit a lot, and that's not good for you. We are really good at farming. We make a lot more food than we need to eat. And we try to sell it to people, or we can try to export it to other countries. But we subsidize corn and corn syrup, and so we can put it into low-fat foods and sell it back to people, and it's kind of a whole dysfunctional system. But so I will go over like looking at labels, but I am very much against high fructose corn syrup. There's tons of studies showing all the bad that can come from that. So if you do anything, you could start looking at labels and trying to avoid that. And then artificial sweeteners, again, this isn't something we had long ago, and it's not something we have even as much back in 1960 when our healthcare costs were similar to other countries. So I think something wrong has happened there. there are lots of studies showing that if you eat artificial sweeteners, you actually ingest more calories. It affects your body's ability to detect fullness or its sweetness indicators, and so you end up consuming more. So you go to the nameless fast food place and you get your burger, and then they give you a bigger diet pop, and then your fries, and then you say, I guess I can eat all this stuff. It turns out it's all the food I need for today, but I don't feel all that full, and so you can sell more food that way. And like I said, you can go to the grocery store, you don't have to work for your food, it's just all readily available. So as I said, it's increasing plant intake with the ability to have some proteins. Does anybody know what diet I'm going to advocate? Guesses from the audience?
Mediterranean?
Hooray, Mediterranean diet. Okay, so there's vegetable intake. I guess I didn't find a picture with too many fruits, so the tomatoes count. Whole grains, nuts, beans. So all those things are healthy for you, and we'll go over the reasons why. So we can see reduction in many conditions, improvement in symptoms. Even if you take certain studies and we put people in the study and analyze over time, of course everybody's going to die, but in a 10-year study, if less people die, we say that improved mortality. So I can give you drugs that do that, I can tell you to do a diet that does that. And so all those things are true with the Mediterranean diet. And we see improvements even if people don't lose weight. So is weight loss important in certain aspects? Yes. Is it the only thing? No. So if you improved your diet, some weight loss may come with, but independently of that, you can still see benefits. All right, so why? And this is the harder thing. So we can do studies and we can say, if we do this thing, we know that people get better, but we don't know why. And so some of it is theoretical and might be disproven, or some of it is actually true, and some of it we don't really know yet. You know, we're only so smart, we learn things as we go along. The world is very complex. Inflammation may play a role. The microbiome, that's actually the bacteria that live in your intestines, can play a role. And then the nutrients that are in the foods we eat play a role. And so this idea of we're so smart, let's just formulate food for people. You eat whatever you want and take a multivitamin, you'll be fine. That has not been true. So there's something synergistic about the foods so that they can go together better. And so 1 + 1 is more than 2. It is so much more beneficial to your body. So if you break everything down and put it into a pill and say that's all that we know, then in 10 years someone says, well, you know, you're missing this other thing, or you were wrong about this. So food is there for a reason. And I will actually say that there are some studies that if you take a multivitamin every day, they actually had a higher death rate during the study period. So people just say, oh, I should take a multivitamin. Well, that's not entirely true. I think you need to have the context for it. Okay, so things that are bad or inflammatory would be saturated fat, which is only found in animals. Trans fat, which is found in processed things, so that basically we take liquid oil and turn it to a solid, so you can bake things and package them up and have them sit in the grocery store for a long time. Now this has been proven to be so bad that it's actually being banned, and so that is going to be less common of an issue. And then high glycemic foods, so I already told you we try to make things low fat, and then you can have more sugar in these things, and then it leads to diabetes. And so if you eat something, like if you eat a sugary item, that is a high glycemic food. If you eat walnuts, that's low glycemic. There's not a lot of free sugar to work with. And so those things are bad for our bodies. So things that are anti-inflammatory, fiber, your body has to work to break down foods that have fiber. So that's where fruits and vegetables come into play. Omega-3 fatty acids, so we see those in walnuts and cold water fish. And then monounsaturated fats, so that's olive oil. We'll get some examples. And then certain spices are anti-inflammatory, and so you can go to somebody and they could say, oh, you know what, you should take this concentrated spice because it might be good for you. Well, that could be true, but the greater idea, I guess, would be to cook with ginger, turmeric, rosemary, oregano, or cloves in certain foods that you eat. And so those aren't all typical Mediterranean things. If you look around the world, you can go to China and you can have a diet that's as good as the Mediterranean diet. You can go to Japan, you can go to India, you can go to other places where they use different ingredients. But the idea is the plants are the important parts. Magnesium has been shown to be anti-inflammatory. So cold water fish, so tuna, salmon, trout, herring, mackerel, sardines, they're all cold water fish. They have a higher concentration of omega-3 fatty acids. So you can find some other fish that have them in there. It's not to say that other fish are bad, it's just they don't have the same ratio. Walnuts, almonds, flaxseed, hemp seed, they all are high as well. Examples for monounsaturated fat, so olive oil, olives, avocados, canola oil, those are all things that would be beneficial oils to utilize. So there's a lot of back and forth, is butter bad or is cream bad or things like that, but I would say in all the studies that I'm going to go through and have used in our Mediterranean diet style studies, they would advocate you use olive oil and not butter. And so that's been a big push in just general to say switch over if it's something you're going to eat a lot of. I don't know if anybody else as far as like a doctor finds this as interesting as me or talks about it as much as I do during the day, but I find this fascinating because it might offer some explanation and it might explain things that we don't completely understand. But there's been lots of new research lately on the microbiome. So it is good bacteria that live in our intestines. So I think everybody kind of gets the idea, like you eat beans, and if you eat them all the time, maybe you're used to them. If you don't eat them, you pay the price with some gas. And that's because of the bacteria that you have in your intestines. So I would say our American poop is not so good. We don't have enough of the stuff we're supposed to. So there's lots of studies. Scientists are taking samples out of people's intestines and analyzing what percentage of different bacteria are in there and then deeming some good and bad. So we can find some that are deemed bad and we find them more in inflammatory conditions, and find some that are good and there are more with people that are doing better. And so does that mean they're necessarily good and bad? No, but it's very intriguing. There are studies where we can find the ratios of good and bad bacteria and decide if there are more in lean people than in people that are obese. And so I went to a conference, I found the study very interesting. If mice eat each other's poop, and we can also feed them human feces, and so if we take bacteria from our stools and give them to lean mice and it's somebody that's obese, that mouse becomes fat. And if you take skinny people's poop and give it to mice, they can make them skinny. If they eat each other's poop, the fat ones become skinny because the skinny poop is stronger than the fat poop. So I think once you get in the right, so the reason this can work is if you get into a pattern and everything is going well, and you like 90% of the time you do a good job, but you want to have your burger and you want to have a pop or you want to have whatever, there's a hit hypothesis. So you can do things well the majority of the time, but you can still go out and do something you're not supposed to, and it will kind of be a drop in the bucket amongst everything. So just something to keep in mind. These bacteria can affect our immune system, so we find some association with different inflammatory conditions. So could it affect rheumatoid arthritis or inflammatory bowel disease, things like that, possibly. And then on the route of like, can it affect our weight? There's studies, only a small difference, because I don't think we really know what we're doing yet, but there's studies where people took high concentrations of good bacteria and actually people lost a little bit of weight. So this could be like the future of weight loss drugs. And then there's also studies showing if you get antibiotics, depends on when, but typically more in childhood, that it may actually impact obesity later in life. Okay, so now we'll go through some of the problems associated with it. And again, everybody's going to die eventually, but I can find you studies where it will delay that in groups of people because of the amount of benefit had with diet change. So if you eat a Mediterranean diet, it doesn't necessarily change your cholesterol. So we give cholesterol pills, and we know that there's associations of cholesterol to heart attacks and strokes, but it's not 100%. It's not always everybody with bad cholesterol is going to have a problem, and and somebody with good cholesterol is never going to have a problem. So there's more to it than that, and so part of that is perhaps in the diet. There's a reduction in the chance of heart attack and a stroke, 30 to 40%, which is similar to what you can get by taking a cholesterol medicine. So again, I said, if you eat more plants, maybe you can avoid prescriptions. It's not to endorse everybody quit their Lipitor, but if you never started in the first place, or you wanted to avoid it, or you were never going to take it because you're so worried about the side effects, then diet changes would be one good way to go. The other thing we know is that there's actually studies where if you eat the healthy diet plus you take your cholesterol medicine because it was indicated, you actually have a net benefit more than either one. The two together can work together. So if you eat nuts 4 times a week and you did nothing else other than maybe replace the bad things with nuts, you can see a 30% reduction. You can eat whole grains 2.5 servings a day, you can see a 21% reduction in the chance of having a heart attack or stroke. Eating a servings of greens, it tends to be a 23% reduction. So if you ate a whole bunch of greens, you would get more benefit. Not to say that they're all going to add up, but each serving you added would be more beneficial. And then eating berries 3 servings a week, again, a benefit. So I would say these things are smaller scale. These are like net benefit studies. So if I did something and I took 10 people and all 10 people just did fabulous, and I could tell you, yep, everybody should eat at Bixby's because everybody lived during our study period, that would be great advertising for Bixby's. But if we then broadened it out to 1,000 people and we learned something different, then we would just say, well, the study didn't have enough people. So these things don't always necessarily add up, but we can say, at least in smaller studies, that even just doing some beneficial things could help you. And again, that's the point of my whole talk, is at least do some positive things from where you are. So this study in France, so they actually took people that already had a heart attack. So it's not too late. Even if something's happened, you can always change and have some benefit. So they could still take their prescriptions. They followed a Mediterranean diet, and it basically said prudent Western diet, and I spent all this time looking, and it was kind of like the lowest grade diet. So it wasn't eating fast food all the time, but it was probably like our standard diet. And then they were followed for 4 years, so they had 75% less heart attacks. And so if you take a group of people who have no health problems and you study them, they're going to have a low rate of heart attack. If you take a bunch of people that have had heart attacks, they're going to have a much higher rate of heart attack. So that's why there's more benefit to the people that already had problems changing their diet. But the idea is still the same. So there was less chances that they ended up in the hospital. So they didn't have angina or chest pain related to their heart not getting enough blood flow. They didn't have heart failure and strokes, blood clots as much. 60% less chance of death during the 4 years than the people who ate the normal diet. Half as many hospitalizations. So I would say that's pretty significant. If you found a drug that did that, that would make buckets of money. But it's a diet and you can do it yourself. And like I said, you could still take prescriptions. There was one aspect of the study that analyzed other parts of what people were doing and taking. So like if they smoked, did they have as much benefit, things like that. So there was still benefit from taking aspirin even if people were doing the healthy diet. All right, so the Mediterranean diet reduces the chance of diabetes 12 to 80%. Again, I told you it depends on how big your study is and what kind of results you're looking for. So at any rate, it depends on how closely you followed the diet. And then the other point I had is people that have diabetes, like there's a myth or fallacy that you can't eat fruit. And I go over this with people a lot of times. That's not true. If you eat fruit and you have diabetes, you're 14% less likely to die during the time when the study was done. If you just are of normal health and you eat more fruits, you actually have a lower rate of even getting diabetes. I would not fear plants, fruits, vegetables, any things like that. I would fear the packaged up something or other in the can of pop and the Powerade and the Gatorade and any of those things that have sugar in them. So in the study of, I think it was from Spain, but they basically figured out like blueberries, grapes, prunes, apples, and pears were better than like bananas or oranges or things like that. But everything was good. It wasn't that anything was really bad for you. But if you want to just drink fruit because I said you should have fruit, so you only drink fruit juice, that actually increased the death rate. So again, the whole thing matters, the whole product, the whole fruit, the whole vegetable. All right, so there's lower rates of cancer in a number of studies. Now, a lot of them are like stomach cancers or things that are not as frequent. So if I could pick a rare cancer and tell you you're less likely to get it, I still wouldn't fear that too much versus common things. So we know one of the biggest correlations is with colon cancer. So eating red meat increases your risk for colon cancer. We eat a lot of red meat in this country, steaks and burgers. We don't eat enough fish. Fish actually lowers your risk for colon cancer. And again, it's cold water fish. So not to say don't go out fishing and be happy that you're eating your walleye, but that's not quite the same. And fruits and vegetables, all those things, they're going to lower the colon cancer risk. There's a little bit less data on breast cancer, but it's kind of a newer area of research. And so again, there was some very positive aspects to that showing reduction in the risk of breast cancer. So you can reduce your chance of getting rheumatoid arthritis, or maybe it's the chances of having enough symptoms of getting rheumatoid arthritis. So if you had really mild symptoms and you ate a healthy diet, you maybe would never notice it. If you're going to have really severe symptoms, maybe having the correct kind of diet would make it better. And again, there are sometimes prescriptions from certain like naturopaths and people that work in diet where they'd say, oh, you can take some turmeric or ginger, or the other idea would be if you cook a lot with this because you have trouble with arthritis, then that could be useful. So dementia is 30 to 35% less risk of chance of getting that if you're eating the correct kind of diet. And so people will come and say, well, is there a diet because I don't want to get dementia, or is there a pill so I don't get dementia? Nope, there's diet and exercise. There's a lower chance of depression with healthy eating, and there's actually studies showing if you have depression and you do diet and certain activities of exercise and certain aspects of diet, that you can improve depression separate from medication. Again, it's less inflammation, so a lower chance of asthma or lower chance of bad asthma symptoms. And I just read through different magazines that are sort of common press, and there's even stuff on, okay, there's a study on sleep problems. So I haven't seen this in any medical journal, but it actually came from a journal. And so if you eat a high sugar diet versus one that contained fiber and protein, people slept better. They got to sleep more quickly, they slept longer, and they slept better. So kind of the sugar stuff affects our bodies in sleep and in other ways. And then whatever does it for somebody, if you're not going to change your diet because you're worried about heart attack, but you don't want to have erectile dysfunction, I can show you that that would reduce your chances of erectile dysfunction as well. So I thought I had to throw it in there. So let's talk a little bit about what we can eat, since I said, well, we should change or at least try to make some modifications or things you can add. So I just looked for some kind of general Mediterranean diet pictures. So, you know, pasta's okay, but I would say that that wasn't the thing that made the biggest difference. But of course, if you think of Mediterranean, a lot of people think of Italy and pasta, and so that's a common thing. But it's the ingredients that go in it. So if you're putting in garlic and herbs and other things that could enhance either the nutrients you're getting or those are the healthy things that you're eating, then I would find that acceptable. But it's really going to be whole grains, and I'll show you some pictures of those that should be more of the focus. But olive oil, so there's studies where you just add a bunch of olive oil to your diet, or you replace things with olive oil, and that was beneficial. Or just adding a bunch of olives. And there was a picture of cheese. Cheese, again, is okay. So I would say, this is maybe even a little more complex than we have to get, but I went to a nutrition conference, and they analyzed different countries in Europe in this study. And so Finland has a high intake of milk, and France has a very low intake of milk. But France has a high intake of cheese, and Finland doesn't have as high of an intake of cheese. And so the heart disease rate is like 4 or 6 times lower in France. And so the speaker was sort of theorizing, like, maybe milk's not the best, but yogurt would be fine and cheese would be fine. That maybe it's the bacteria that are in the things that we eat. So if you have the cheese sit and it needs to turn into cheese, it has certain bacteria in it, and yogurt has bacteria in it. Just something to think about. I would still, you'd rather have milk than Coke. All right, so fish, again, made it on the list, and then just the color of what you eat. So having a colorful variety of food that you eat during the week is very useful. So all these different colors of food have different antioxidants in them that can benefit you. So not only should you try to eat more plants, you should try to eat more variety of color. All right, so again, trying to make food fun. So we let my 5-year-old watch a troll movie, and he wanted a troll pizza, so I made him a troll pizza. And he ate it kind of just like if we had a fun little creature there. He ate all the carrots and the cucumbers and the celery and whatever else was on the list. So you need to find your own troll pizza, so to speak. What does it for you? What can you tolerate eating, or what are you excited to eat? Not all my pictures are all that great, but I just started taking pictures of some things once I decided to do the talk. And I have radishes, greens, peas, tomatoes that I grew in my garden, and then smoked salmon from the farmer's market. I think that's about it. But and feta cheese probably from the grocery store, and some quinoa. So, you know, I guess I like look local. You can include this constellation of things in there, and that the synergy of food may make a difference. So if I were to just snack on each of those things separately, it may not equal the whole. And so having some protein, having some acid, having some oil, those can actually make certain nutrients become more accessible to your body. So you could eat your broccoli, or you could possibly saute it in olive oil, and some things you would get more of, and maybe some things you would get less. As you cooked it, they would break down. That was my attempt to make a Bixby bowl. So Stephen, you still win, but I was inspired. So if you want to look at things that include whole grains and are healthy, then you could go take a look at what's at Bixby's. And I didn't get paid to say that either. And then I made wild rice soup, and when I first started cooking, lots of things were more basic and rudimentary, and I would add vegetables to prepackaged things, and got a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better. So the soup was kind of that way too. It started out probably with cream and whatever else is in the typical Minnesota wild rice soup. Add some more vegetables, add a less cream. Okay, I still liked it. I'll try it again. Less cream, more vegetables, and then until it looks more colorful. And so if we're taking the long view, and I tell you, make some change, and you say, I just drastically changed my whole diet, 2 weeks later, I don't like this, I'm not going to do it. That's not my point. The point is, if you do something and 2 weeks later you do a little more, and 2 weeks later you do a little more, in a year you'll be in fantastically better shape than you are now. From a diet standpoint, I'm not saying you're going to all go be on American Ninja Warrior or something, but a very common meal that we'll eat at home during the summer is grilled fish, grilled zucchini, and a tomato bruschetta. So if I were to go to the grocery store, I would buy some salmon. It would have a skin on. I would put olive oil on the bottom. I would just plop that on the grill, and I would not flip it over. And I would salt and pepper and lemon zest the top. And so I find that very simple. Just close the lid, and when you figure it out with your grilling, you know when it's done, and it's done. I would say there's been way more vegetables grilled on my grill than meat, so sometimes I'll have the whole thing full of that, and then I'll make something that we can chop up and make as sort of a collection of vegetables with some other seasonings or something added to it, and then there might be leftovers. Well, now the leftovers are still healthy. I don't have a problem eating leftovers, and sometimes people just need to get used to doing that. They just need to make enough of what they're going to eat and be okay eating it again. But I got this salmon from Lake Superior, or sorry, this trout from Lake Superior, and had no skin on it, and so I said, well, okay, I guess I'll put it on foil, and that would work. So you could take your walleye and you could take your northern, you could do that, because a lot of people fry it. Again, I wouldn't advocate that per se. So I would say if you can put more whole grains into things, that would be better. So if I can get a whole wheat bread, I would rather do that. That would be healthier. Whole wheat pasta should be better, but I don't think you should fool yourself in saying, well, that's fantastic, I'm eating whole grains. It's the same as what I'm going to show in a little bit. I also think that there's some data showing if we make something, it's better than the processed whatever thing that came out of a factory bread. So you can go buy, you know, the cheap white bread or the cheap whole grain bread from the same place, and they make buckets of it and they put it in a wrapper, and you can buy it on the shelf a week later, and it's still supposed to be pretty good because of all the preservatives it has. there are things showing if you have the like slow version of it, so it's a sourdough because it sat around and it got the natural bacteria that are in the air and it got slowly fermented and then you made it into bread, that actually may be very beneficial, and that could count as a whole grain standpoint because it will actually include some good things for your body. It's kind of like yogurt and sauerkraut and kefir and anything else fermented. There's a big fermented craze that there could be benefit that way. So I'm not afraid of eating bread. In fact, I like to just, I don't tend to get the cheap bread anymore. I either make my own or I buy stuff that is better for me. So here's some whole grains. So you can cook most of these things just like rice. It takes longer, and you can eat them similarly. They're nuttier and have more of a crunch. You can grind things up. So like I'll make pizza crust and I put whole grains in it. The dinosaur pancakes had ground up oatmeal and flaxseed in them amongst having normal flour. So if you do all of that, you end up with a brick and it's like a granola bar. If you just put some in, there's ways to figure out ratios. So I didn't include recipes of anything. If this is a special interest, there's, you can sort of explore on your own, or we have a dietitian, or those are the things to kind of pique your interest, and then you can take it from there. So quinoa, amaranth is another type of grain. So if you go find the Bob's Red Mill part of the supermarket, these are things you can find, and they'll give you directions on how to cook them, and you can figure out if you like them. I think a lot of people don't know what wheat berries are. That's what the wheat looks like, and then it gets ground up into flour. So that counts as a whole grain. Wheat's not bad, gluten's not bad. It's maybe our application of the ingredient that's been the problem. Teff is very microscopic. I've never had it whole. It gets ground up and it makes injera, which is Ethiopian bread. So if anybody's ever had that. Okay, so I put in some things that are common that we eat. I was just going to go through, like I said, just make some positive choices. So just some ideas to apply that to your own life. So, if you look at what most Americans are eating, there's a very high ratio of burgers, hot dogs, and pizza, along with chips, French fries, soda. So you can have a burger. I would say a lot of recommendations include like a burger a month so like cardiologists will say, I'll eat one burger a month. You can have one patty, not all that other like stuff drooping out of it, and it shouldn't be the giant 2 or 3 burger thing and have a bunch of bacon and other bad things on it. So I guess I would say if you go get some grass-fed beef, I can tell you that there's things showing grass-fed beef is better than commercially raised beef. So they're eating the grass. That's what they're meant to eat. They have the right bacteria in their bodies. They put the right constituents into their meat, so it's less inflammatory. You have more omega-3 fatty acids, and therefore you should be better because you ate a grass-fed piece of beef than one not. But I would say that's not defined and entirely true, but that's what I like to think. So if I'm going to eat something, I'm going to either eat like venison, bison, grass-fed beef, something like that, not just go to the grocery store and find what's on sale. I would say maybe make your own. If you go buy a prepackaged patty and you read what's in them, they put a bunch of filler ingredients in it. So you would be better off getting the ground beef yourself and making your own burger than to buy something and it has the pink slime and a bunch of salt and whatever else that's supposed to make it taste good. So maybe you can have the burger, you downsize it so it's got your 1/4 pounder, and then don't have fries and don't have the soda. You eat an apple on the side, or eat some vegetables or greens. Like I said, they're very good. I guess if I have a burger, then I have a side of broccoli, or I have something else healthy. Hot dogs, I guess I can't even advocate making those good. I have no idea why we like them so much, but on my list here of ingredients it says mechanically separated turkey and mechanically separated chicken. So we take some scraps and we can put it into a hot dog. Then there's also 380 milligrams of sodium. So you have to watch the salt intake in these things. And this is where restaurants and fast food and everything comes into play. So if we put salt and sugar and stuff, it tastes better. You want to eat more and you want to come back. And you have to really be careful of that. Okay, so pizza. You can make healthy pizzas, I would argue. I think this one actually had a cauliflower crust. So it actually doesn't include any wheat or other grain. If you buy prepackaged crusts, you have to look again for salt. I would say it would be one big thing to watch out for. And then add a lot of vegetables and less cheese. So if anybody knows about Neapolitan pizzas, like that's the kind of pizza I would make. I would put a lot of tomatoes and a lot of basil and a lot of other vegetables and a little bit of cheese on it. It wouldn't be cheese plus we put a little bit of tomato sauce on and said it has some vegetable in it. That's not true. And then if you want to eat whatever kind of pizza comes from a place in town, sure, maybe just eat less of it. Don't order the stuffed crust one, and don't put extra cheese on it, and have some other good stuff on the side. Oh, so here's the pizza crust. So there's 1 gram of fiber in this. There's 31 grams of carbs, 380 milligrams of sodium in 1/6 of a crust. So, I mean, I'll talk to people and then they ate 1/3 of the pizza or something. Well, they ate 2 servings, so they have to double everything. So just really be conscientious of your serving size. Okay, so spaghetti, again, sort of everything in moderation. Have some pasta. The tomato sauce I don't think is all that terrible, but there's certainly added sugar, and there's 480 milligrams of sodium. And so it would be better for you to cook down some tomatoes, you have your own sauce, and then if you need the salt, you salt at the end. That's like 15% of your sodium. If you put it in while you're cooking, you don't notice it as much, and that's where we get a lot of added sodium, and that's what makes things shelf stable longer. So again, looking at labels, I would, like if I'm gonna make pasta, I'm going to put in zucchini, or I'm going to put in some other kind of vegetable in it, so that we're getting that as part of the food. I kind of have it out for powdered Parmesan. It has a lot of tree pulp in it, which I guess is good if we want to have trees to sell to places, but not probably all that great for you. All right, so salad, so that should be safe to eat, right? Yes, except for I would really watch your salad dressing. So again, corn syrup. So here's the fat-free one with corn syrup as the second ingredient. So there's no fat, there's only 12 grams of carbs with 5 grams of sugars. I mean, it doesn't seem all that bad, but you have all this corn syrup that you didn't need, and it doesn't help you in any way. Oil perhaps would make you get more nutrients out of the vegetables, so that would be something better to look at. So again, looking at labels and then serving size, I mean, 2 tablespoons, maybe some people put on 8. You just have to watch how much you're adding. So the doctor said I should have regular salad dressing, so I'll buy this. Number 1 ingredient, sugar. So again, be careful. It's not that fat-free is terrible and normal fat stuff is, oh, it just must be good. What do I think about the dyes? Well, I would say they were not included in any healthy diets, and that's its own what are we doing to ourselves question, because there's studies showing if you are around high pesticide exposure, there's more cancer, there's ADHD in kids, there's all sorts of bad things that happen. So the military industrial complex in pharmaceuticals and in farming, I think there's something wrong there. So adding food coloring, not a big fan. So here's, again, I don't advocate any certain place, but I just was looking for pictures. So this one has 13 grams of fat, so you say, well, that's not good. It does have canola or sunflower oil. So canola or olive oils were included on the monounsaturated oils that I talked about at the beginning. So just something to think about. All right, so soup. Again, I think if you can make your own, but if you're not going to make your own, again, I kind of started making stuff by, I could take chicken noodle soup and I could microwave some carrots and put the carrots in there, so now you have vegetables in it, or whatever other vegetable you like, or chop up some greens, or just put spinach on there and put your hot soup on it and the spinach wilts and you can eat the spinach. So this has 890 milligrams of sodium. And that is in 1/2 cup, and there are 2.5 servings in the soup container. So that means you can eat, you would have to be able to eat the soup 2.5 times, and you would be getting half your daily value. If you ate the whole thing of soup, you would now have maxed out your sodium for the day in 1 can of soup. So this is the new, we moved away from the food pyramid to my plate. So half the plate, fruits and vegetables, whole grains, and a protein, and probably because there's dairy industry behind it. You get a dairy thing on there too, but it's not to say you have to do that. That's not the healthy aspect. If you can't tell, I'm kind of cynical of all the large things that we have, all the large corporations. Like somebody's already trying to sell you something or do something, and there's no money in the Mediterranean diet studies. I'm not going to make any money from any of you, so hopefully you'll trust me on that. So should I eat local or organic? Yes, pick one, pick both. So we know if you pick something and it sits for longer, you don't have as many nutrients in it, so the sooner you could have it, the better. So if you're going to get organic from South America, or you could get it local, I guess I would argue for local. You can freeze things and it retains a lot of nutrients more than canning things does. So I would look to go through the grocery store, and I guess I've kind of skipped the canned vegetables and I would go to the freezer vegetables now. And then if you have local food, it doesn't mean that they're gonna not put pesticides on it or that it's organic, so you can always ask. But again, you kind of just have to make your own determinant, because I don't think anybody has a definitive answer for you. There's gonna people that they'll stand here and they would argue for an hour on the merits of one thing or the other. I don't think there's clear data, and I think you should find out what fits your conscience. And so organic does not mean better or healthy. I mean, I can find like sugary cereal that's organic. So just not to get sucked into that aspect. So I don't know if this is entirely true. I kind of made the whole hierarchy up, but I give gold, silver, and bronze medals to certain protein sources. So you can get protein from vegetables. It's not like you have to eat meat. So if you're inspired, you eat more plants, and then you like eating plants, and you eat more plants and more plants, and you eat less meat and less meat, eventually you could become vegan. And then there's a whole set of data on that, and then nuts and beans are very good sources. And then again, the fatty cold water fish. So salmon, trout, tuna, mackerel, anchovy, sardines, oysters, mussels, shrimp, scallops, seafood. So things from the sea we know are beneficial. I would put like a step down. People will say, well, I eat a bunch of chicken. Well, okay, that's good. That's still not as good as this first column. You can include our local fish. So you have lake fish, chicken, eggs. Eggs are perfectly acceptable to eat. They're included in the pyramids of the Mediterranean diet, like 4 servings a week. So they got a bad rap for a while. They contain cholesterol, but it's not the kind that's going to affect us in a bad way. Game meats, I would put those over any kind of factory-raised animal. So if you go get your deer that's been living in the woods, it's been doing a lot of healthy running around and hopefully eating healthy things, you're probably going to be better for it. Again, grass-fed beef. Tofu could probably go up here. There's maybe there's soy something or other to worry about, I don't know. But I'd just put tofu in a good category too if you're inclined to have it. And then you go to all of the things we normally have. So pork, beef, ham, burgers, brats, sausages, not as good. Now, some people would argue like there's these pigs that run around in Spain and they only eat acorns and they have a whole bunch of omega-3 fatty acid in them. So are they really healthy? Well, maybe. I don't know if they count as good as fish. No one did a study on them, but they're not we don't have those in the United States. They're not living out on the farm eating whatever we're giving them typically. So should we be concerned about the mercury content in cold water fish? Yes, but not overly. I guess I wouldn't eat a bunch of tuna every single day because we can show that that has some adverse effects, but I would say if you're eating the other things, they're not as large a fish and they're not predatory as much, so they don't have as much mercury content. So it is a concern, but again, when I went to this talk and this cardiologist said, you can have, I tell patients they can have red or white meat, so your white meat is salmon and your red meat is tuna. I mean, that's much less of a concern. Like we're felt that the chances of mercury poisoning are so much lower than the fact that tons of people are having heart attacks and strokes. Your net benefit is going to be greater to eat the things that we're saying you should eat. And I'm not even going to get into should you get the farmed or free or whatever. I think if we create more market for eating the healthy things, that hopefully some of the how do you raise fish and some of the science and stuff would improve that way. Now somebody asked about coffee at the beginning and I said, you should have it now before I tell you it's bad, but it's okay for you. So it's not bad, it's good. So with coffee, there's actually lower death rates in some studies. So I would say there isn't really a lot of data points saying that it's harmful unless you're ingesting a lot. And if you're somebody younger with a heart problem or something, then yes. But in general, if you're going to drink coffee, at the very least, if things are showing it's good, I don't think it's going to come back and say it's bad. So there was a lower death rate, and in fact, it got a little bit better. So 12% lower death rate during the study for 1 cup versus 16% for 4 cups. So it was a little bit better to drink more, but not a lot better. There's actually a lower risk for diabetes. So if you drink a cup of coffee a day, there's a 7% lower risk of diabetes. If you drink 2 cups, it's 14%. So decaf works to prevent diabetes. It doesn't work to lower your risk for Parkinson's dementia, at least in the study that analyzed that aspect. So you probably need the caffeine. It wasn't substantial, but it's something like 10 or 15% something lower risk for Parkinson's dementia. And so in general, there's recommendations like you can have coffee, don't drink more than 4 cups, just because of the adverse effects of it. All right, so as far as what to expect, so good food costs more. If you're going to buy the cheapest of something, there's probably a reason it's cheap. So that's one thing to expect if you're going to start changing your diet. And then ease into changes. So lots of people kind of complain like, I can't have less salt, or I can have, you know, I don't want to make this change. But most people's taste buds will change after a couple weeks. So if you stick at it and you just say, well, it's not forever, and then you get used to it, you're going to notice that you now like the new food that you're having, and then you might make another positive change and build on it. And I already talked about if you just put a bunch of fiber in your diet, you might have some adverse effect, some people more than others. So sometimes gradual changes are good in that aspect. So I would just avoid sugary beverages, including, or I shouldn't say including because there's not supposedly sugary, but the sugar-free kinds. So some of those kinds actually, your body doesn't absorb the sugar, and so it can cause diarrhea. Other kinds, we think it interrupts the signaling of fullness, and maybe it's messing up your microbiome, and so you're killing off the good bacteria and and you're left with only the bad ones. So I would try to, water is great. Go with water. You can limit portions, especially meat. Again, frozen fruits or vegetables better than canned in general. Watch your salt intake, and then try to read labels. So I think a lot of people are just like, I'm hungry, I want to eat something, whatever's the quickest. So get rid of the junk food. If you have apples and carrots and whatever other healthy things sitting out and you're really hungry, you're going to eat the apple before you die, before you can make it to the store and buy the chips that you shouldn't eat. So it's important to kind of be aware of what type of person you are. Some people get stressed out and they don't eat, and some people get stressed out and they eat a lot, or some people are tired and they eat more, or any of those things. So I think just some awareness of what type of person you are, and sometimes that can help you plan ahead. So variety makes us eat more, so buffet you're going to eat more than if you have a portion of food. And then I guess when I travel, like I'll bring fruits or vegetables, nuts, something like that, not have junk food in the car, and then I can't have a lot of trouble finding restaurants that I think are any good, and so I'll go to the grocery store and go to buy some pre-made salad or buy something that way rather than trying to find junk that I don't want to really eat. Are peanuts as good as walnuts and pecans? No, not quite, but I would say if you're going to eat some nuts, that's better than a lot of other things you can eat. So I eat probably peanut butter at least 4 days a week. And I don't eat walnuts 4 days a week necessarily, or walnut butter or almond butter or something like that. So, but I would say over time, the more things I learn, the more my diet's improved. So I eat a lot more nuts than I used to, or I eat a lot more other the healthy things that are on the list than I used to. Okay, so this is kind of everything condensed into one. So you should be physically active. You should plan your meals around whole grains, fruits, vegetables, beans, nuts, anything colorful, full of fiber. Those are all good things for you. Here's your fish and seafood, less so poultry, eggs, cheese, yogurt, even less often meats and sweets. I didn't even get into drinking because we drink too much in the Midwest, but if you could have 1 5-ounce glass of wine a day, that would be included in being healthy, not a 12-pack of beer. And then everyday water. So you can't go wrong condensing down into that pyramid. So one other way to think of it is there's lots of ways people put things, but eat only what you can find in nature, so you can't find the food coloring things. You have to be able to find the whole fruits and vegetable. You can't find some synthetic, chopped up, whatever, turned into something else. Eat only what you can pronounce, because then you know what it is. It didn't get made in a laboratory. And maybe eat what your grandparents or great-grandparents would recognize as food, which doesn't include a lot of what we have available. And I don't know if this is entirely true, because I hear a lot of bad things that dogs eat, but my wife would at least postulate only eat what our dog would eat. So if we take her out, she's like sniffed Oreos on the ground and Cheetos and other things and just keeps going because it's not real food. All right, thank you, everyone.